We're in the second half of The Mandalorian Season 3. We had another episode of things I really enjoyed and a few things that I was not a fan of. However, I will start off with my absolute favorite moment of this episode, and that is our very first time live action Zeb Orrelios. Some of you might be aware of him from Rebels, and it was really cool. First look at him as a live action character, even though he was only in the episode for maybe 30 seconds. And that was Steve Bloom, who did the voice of the character Zeb from Rebels animated series, doing the voice here. So that was like my absolute favorite part of this episode. Totally unexpected, completely out of the blue, but really, really cool. Nice little Easter egg, and hopefully kind of giving us a first taste of what we expect to see in the upcoming Ahsoka series. His appearance is probably going to be my favorite takeaway from this season up to this point. We also had Captain Carson Teva back as that sort of Outer Rim, New Republic sort of scout, flying around in his X-Wing, kind of checking things out, paying visits to some of these planets, some who are part of the New Republic, some like Nevarro, who are kind of not really ready to join in yet, but he's still keeping an eye on the sector. He's back now, and I really enjoy when he gets to be on the show, because he's a huge Star Wars fan, the actor. So this must just be a joy for him to just get to periodically play this same character. And we had a SNL alumni, Tim Meadows, as Colonel Tuttle, that guy running procurement on Coruscant for the New Republic. And interestingly, we have the former Imperial officer, Elia Kane, who has managed to work her way into the procurement department. She seems to kind of be reporting directly to the colonel in terms of his sort of office staff. If she's looking for someone or something, particularly someone, procurement is a really smart department to get into because procurement touches every single part of the galaxy. If it's somewhere in the New Republic, it's going to pass through procurement at some point because everyone needs supplies, fuel, food, arms, you name it, they need it. It goes through procurement. So really, really smart place to, if you're going to infiltrate the New Republic, to do it there, especially since that's kind of a department that's just mundane, same thing every day, paperwork, bureaucracy. There's probably not of like heavy security on them, even though there's probably some to a degree in like monthly audits to make sure no one's stealing stuff. But in your day-to-day operations, that's a pretty good place to begin like scoping out if you're looking for something. But this episode is mainly about Nevarro, our burgeoning trade port that High Magistrate Greef Karga is still running. Here we get into the first of our really dumb things. And Disney really makes it difficult for me to enjoy Star Wars as much as I want to enjoy Star Wars. Pirates showed up before. Greef Karga and Din Djarin killed a couple of them, and Greef Karga apparently knew who they were, which means he knew who they worked for, which means he knew there'd be repercussions, but still hasn't hired even one security guard for this whole planet. It's just bizarre that this company that's making this just continues to make these just characters make really just dumb choices. And it takes away from my ability to enjoy a show when you have characters that clearly are not this stupid, but the plot requires them to be dumb. And we got a few moments of that in this episode. We had the Mandalorian stuff, which is really cool later, and them just being kind of morons in the middle of it briefly. But the episode opens up. Karga is having one of his sort of staff meetings. They're kind of looking at the logistical layout of the main port town and maybe shifting different areas or different sectors closer to shipping, and just kind of all that kind of logistical stuff when you're running a town, running a city. And then Gorian Shard's pirate ship shows up, and he basically contacts Greef Karga, insults him, tells him, you know, contact me when you're ready to surrender, and starts bombing the place. So Karga records a message and sends it off to the New Republic. And this is when we switch to a bar, which seems to be a New Republic officers like sort of hangout bar. This is where we see Carson Teva at the bar having a drink. And the bartender like brings him the message, and he listens to the message. Greef Karga is like, you know how much it pains me to reach out and ask for your help, but we're desperate and we need the New Republic to come and basically get rid of these pirates. And this is when Zeb Orrelios comes strolling up and just sidles up at the bar right next to Captain Teva, and he and Carson and Zeb have a very quick conversation. I thought they did a really, really good job. I don't know how much of that was prosthetic and how much of it was special effects. So overall, though, you can see they spent time and money on that 15 to 30-second shot of having a live action Zeb for the first time. Favorite moment in the episode, probably my favorite moment in the season so far. I loved the Rebels animated series, and I'm looking forward to seeing a bunch of those characters finally come into live action. Mostly we're expecting most of them in the Ahsoka show. Captain Teva then goes to see Colonel Tuttle, who's the running procurement on Coruscant. He's the one he's got to go through to requisition some New Republic, basically soldiers or fighters, to go to Nevarro with him to basically kick these pirates off world. And the colonel is really not interested. And this is when we see Elia Kane, who we now discover is working for the procurement colonel, and she's basically already working Tuttle and convinces him to hell with Nevarro. They're on their own. They didn't want to join the New Republic. We have requests from New Republic planets. They take priority. So it's up to them whether they survive or not. You can see Captain Teva is there's something going on out there in the Outer Rim. This isn't a one-off. There has to be another reason why Moff Gideon was so invested in that place, and now there's reports of other ships and TIE fighters and old Imperial things happening in that sector. So something is brewing out there. The longer you ignore it, by the time you finally recognize it, it's going to be too late for us to really do anything to stop whatever it is that's coming. Again, a nice little scene. And I like how it sort of mirrors the things that I liked about Andor, where on Andor it was the Imperial bureaucracy. And here on this show, this season at least, we're getting a look at some of the New Republic bureaucracy, where it's someone in that position of power who's just not interested can decide the fate of an entire people and planet on just because maybe they didn't have lunch and they don't really want to deal with it. Who knows? It could be any simple reason. And then a whole planet is condemned. In some ways, we're seeing that the New Republic isn't all that better than, it is better than the Empire, obviously, but from just a running the bureaucracy side, they don't seem to have anybody better at it than the Empire did. They just might have better intentions, but they just don't necessarily have the skill set yet. These are probably people who weren't working in these positions of authority, running these departments before, who are now find themselves in this position. And that's what lets someone like Elia Kane, as this sort of repatriated former Imperial officer, now a sort of semi-New Republic person, it lets her kind of work her way up the system because they'll tap her expertise. Just assuming she's gone through the bureaucratic steps, each department before she came to me signed off on her. So she's good. She can do the work. Don't have to worry about her. She's benefiting from the New Republic's bureaucracy not really being a well-oiled machine. And I like that kind of stuff. That is part of sci-fi storytelling that I enjoy, seeing that aspects of things. It's nice to counterbalance the action with this sort of real-world-esque bureaucratic machine that gets in their way of solving things that should be more readily solvable. So Captain Teva decides, okay, I'm going to go seek out Din Djarin, find the Mandalorians, see if they'll help. He's able to go right to where the Mandalorians are hiding on this planet. And it turns out that the R5 droid that Din Djarin got on Tatooine from the shop has been in communication with the New Republic this whole time. And through R5, Captain Teva has been kind of keeping tabs on kind of where the Mandalorians, this sort of Children of the Watch group, is kind of been hanging out. And he goes right to them and asks for their help. And of course, they don't want anything to do with him. To them, the New Republic isn't really all that much better than the Empire. But Din Djarin owes him a debt, so they agree to help. And then Bo-Katan takes that sort of military leadership role again, and they all pile into her gauntlet and go to Nevarro. Of course, Din and Grogu in his Naboo fighter. And then we get to my second favorite part of the episode, a live-action Mandalorian drop out of a gauntlet ship where they come down and then they just start killing pirates. And it's really, really cool because this is stuff we saw in the Clone Wars animated series and in the Star Wars Rebels animated series as well. I loved the Mandalorian-centric episodes of both of those series. And this is something we saw in those animated series where the Mandalorians do their drop out of their ships and just go and wreck shop on whoever they're fighting. And it was really cool to get to see that in live action for the first time, a proper gauntlet drop. They come down, they're coordinated, they're kind of moving street to street, doing their thing. And then we get to the second part of the episode that I really didn't care for, where the Mandalorians suddenly have to turn into stupid people without any sense of logistics or tactical ability, who then find themselves suddenly boxed in. Now, that is not out of the norm, that you might, in an urban environment like that, you could end up walking into sort of a box trap. Again, these are Mandalorians. They can fly, and they all have those like sort of little small missiles on their wristbands where they can shoot little missiles off and kill people with them. And they're pinned down, and there's just a few pirates behind a few little like shelter pieces, and then there's somewhere behind them, behind a few little shelter pieces, and they're getting shot at, and some of them are getting hit and injured. And I'm like, fire your missiles, fire your missiles, fire your missiles. No missiles. They all forget that they have this very convenient weapon that could take out people close to them hiding behind little barriers, shooting at them. But if they did that, then we wouldn't get Paz Vizsla rolling up with the big cannon, just mowing pirates down, which was really, really cool. You know, that's like old school 80s or 90s, like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone action movie, where he's just chugging along with a big gun, just killing bad guys. So that was really, really cool. You can do that without having to make the Mandalorians stupid, though. I wish they would stop dumbing down smart tactical fighters temporarily, because that's just easier to do. It's kind of annoying. I shouldn't blame Disney, but this is something that seems more prevalent since Disney took ownership of Star Wars. We get some really just dumb moments in some of these episodes, in some of these fight scenes that are just silly and out of character. Overall, it was a really cool scene to see Mandalorian's gauntlet drop, come down, and go street to street fighting a bunch of pirates. And then Din Djarin is basically leading the pirate ship away so it stops bombarding the town. And there's pirate fighters after him, so we get our sort of fight in the atmosphere between ships. Bo-Katan comes swooping down, and really, really cool stuff. I'm a big fan of Bo-Katan. I love that character since her first appearance in the Clone Wars animated series. Really, really interesting Mandalorian, and I'll take all the live action I can get of her character. Katie Sackhoff does just as great a live action job as she did just voice acting in the animated role. And we also got to see the armor kind of show off as well, because they get pinned down again. Even Paz Vizsla is kind of pinned down and unable to use his big cannon by a pirate's up top in the tower, just with this big sort of like kind of a 50 cal sort of laser weapon just shooting down at them until the armor comes up behind them and just wrecks them with her hammers. She doesn't use a gun for whatever reason. She's just like breaking bones and skulls with her hammers. Pretty cool moment. Again, a little silly. I mean, the guy firing the big cannon, I get he doesn't hear anything. But the guy standing like halfway in the room in the doorway, who doesn't hear his buddy's skulls and bones getting cracked and crushed, you know. But again, it's Star Wars, it's Disney Star Wars, so you're gonna have silly moments where the guy should notice. But let's just say he's too close to the cannon, it's just that loud, so we can kind of go with it. It's still fun seeing the armor, you know, get to fight. But overall, it was a really fun scene, and most of the pirates who landed on the planet are killed. A few basically surrender finally, because even the townspeople come back out where they fled into the town to help. And the one thing that surprised me about this whole fight with the pirates is that instead of just realizing he's outmatched and getting the hell out of there, the sort of pirate king Gorian Shand basically just loses it and goes down with his ship. His ship gets destroyed, he gets killed. But Vane, however, was one of the other pirates we saw who was in a fighter trying to fight against Din and Bo and everything, and he realizes, okay, this is done, we've lost, and he's like, see ya, Gorian, and he just takes off and gets the hell out of there. Just basically mutinies and abandons Gorian, and Gorian basically gets killed, and then the ship being destroyed. I was really surprised that Gorian Shard got taken out here. I would have thought he would have been like kind of the main sort of pesky antagonist for the rest of this season, but he's taken out quick, which means we should start to maybe get what they've been sort of hinting at and building towards somewhere in these last, I think there's only 3 episodes to go. If you go back and you rewatch these 5 episodes, there's just enough little hints scattered throughout where you can realize they're building up towards something much bigger happening out here, in particular in the Outer Rim. While Moff Gideon might have been one of the ones involved in just like bombing the crap out of Mandalore, he's probably not the one who bombed Bo-Katan's family home into dust, into rubble. There's someone else out there. There's something else brewing. And we had our bigger hint of that in the final scene of the episode, where we're back to Carson Teva again, the New Republic captain. And he's doing his sort of patrols out in the area, and he comes across a damaged ship, a transport ship. He can see that it's been fired on. It wasn't just didn't hit something, it was attacked. One cool little tidbit, we discovered that these droids, a little thing that pops up out of the droid's head and can look around, can also detach, and it's a probe that can go out into space and fly around and basically record, which is what it does. It goes inside the damaged ship, and we see dead, frozen, like guards of the New Republic, and then they're sort of scanning it, sending the info back, and it looks like that's the ship that Moff Gideon was being transported on. So somebody attacked this ship to presumably rescue Moff Gideon. However, the very last thing we see is a piece of Beskar embedded in like one of the walls inside the ship. That seems to indicate that it was Mandalorians who attacked the ship and then took Moff Gideon. Now, whether they were Mandalorians who did this, and for whatever reason, either Mandalorians went after Gideon to get revenge, whether it was Mandalorians, maybe even the Night Owls. So this could be the reason why the Night Owls actually abandoned Bo-Katan. Maybe they got lured away, hired away by someone else to go rescue Moff Gideon. Now, it would be weird to hire the very people who captured Moff Gideon and handed him over to the New Republic to then be hired by somebody else to go and rescue Moff Gideon. But if that is the case, it makes you wonder, what were they paid or what promises were made to them for them to like basically come over and help Moff Gideon instead. But it's a possibility because we see Paz Vizsla and the armorers group who fought against Greef Karga when Greef Karga was working for Moff Gideon and them, kind of. This time they went and helped him and rescued him and saved him and his people. They're now on opposite sides, so it's very possible that the Night Owls who left Bo are now on the other side for their own reasons. We'll see who that is. It could also just be somebody just putting that piece of Beskar there to make it look like the Mandalorians did this, to kind of set the Mandalorians up, because they know this group, the Children of the Watch, is out there and is beginning to present itself as a problem, because they're now starting to come together as a more cohesive unit and not just people in hiding. They're now starting to kind of step out and appear and show themselves a bit more and more, which could probably be something whoever's behind what's really building probably doesn't want. For those who don't care about any kind of potential spoilers, I'm just going to briefly say what the basic theory is. Most of you probably who watch all the Star Wars stuff are aware of this. If you're someone watching this who doesn't have any idea, you might not know the larger Star Wars world, and you don't want to be potentially spoiled, I'm going to put the word spoiler up on the screen, and it's going to remain on the screen while I just briefly talk about what the expectation is of what this thing is building. All right, so you can mute just while you see the word spoiler, and then you can unmute when the word goes away. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the expectation here is that it's Grand Admiral Thrawn has found his way back from whatever dimension or area that he and Ezra were dragged to by those space whales at the end of Star Wars Rebels. And he's now back. He's got his fleet somewhere, if not in the Outer Realm, in that area just kind of outside this sort of unmapped part of space. And Nevarro, I believe, as a planet, is just kind of on the outskirts, just before that whole sort of unmapped area. And it's believed that that's where Grand Admiral Thrawn is still kind of set up with his fleet. And the kind of TIE bombers and TIE fighters we've been seeing make incursions are Thrawn's people. And that Moff Gideon wasn't the one running whatever has been going on out here all this time. Moff Gideon was working for Thrawn. And it's more likely than not that if the Mandalorians did attack that ship and grab Moff Gideon, it was something's convinced a particular group of Mandalorians to side with Thrawn and help him. So that's the expectation. And this is all really more building up towards the Ahsoka show. If we do get Grand Admiral Thrawn before this season is over, I imagine it would probably be in a post-credit scene in the final episode of this season. Kind of how we got that Boba Fett and Fennec Shand going back to Tatooine and taking Jabba's palace end credit scene at the end of season 2. I imagine if we see Thrawn, it'll be in something like that. That's what the expectation is as to what's actually brewing out here. End of the spoiler section. So 3, 2, 1. For those of you who did mute during the spoiler section who are now back, overall, I actually really enjoyed this episode. I just wish, please stop making your characters temporarily dumb just because you don't want to be bothered writing a better fight scene. Thankfully, there wasn't a lot of dumb moments in this episode outside of the obvious how the hell does Nevarro still not have even one security person, let alone a security infrastructure. Outside of that, which just seems to be a thing with Nevarro for whatever reason. Part where the Mandalorians just kind of got stupid briefly during the urban battle with the pirates. Luckily, it was a very brief moment, but overall, I actually really enjoyed this episode. It was really good. My only other quibble is, can you please, whoever's writing the dialogue in this show, can you write above a 3rd grade level dialogue? You can actually write a little bit more developed dialogue between characters. This is just the most simplistic dialogue in this season. Maybe that's a quibble on my part and nitpick, but you know, they shouldn't be talking in, hi, this is the most obvious thing that the audience already knows, but just in case Fred there watching isn't paying attention, and I gotta remind Fred, because Fred doesn't pay attention sometimes when he's watching. You know, you don't need them to say the dumbest, most obvious thing. Again, it's something that just isn't necessary, that takes away from the show. Din Djarin doesn't need to tell Bo-Katan, hey, shoot at the last engine left on the ship. I think Bo-Katan kind of knows what to do. She's more experienced in this kind of fighting than most of this little Mandalorian group combined. I'm sure she's aware of shooting the last engine that's keeping that ship in the air. So I wonder what they view their like demographic as, because this is a Star Wars show, it's a Mandalorian show. I would think you're going to have an audience that runs the spectrum. Young kids might be loving, like little Grogu is kind of their thing, so they're watching all of this. This is their first exposure to Mandalorians and things like that. But you're probably going to have a lot of Clone Wars animated series fans, a lot of Rebels fans watching this. You can up the dialogue maybe to 5th grade level. Try that out for an episode and then just work your way up a little bit. Please, can you write just a little better? Overall, kind of minor quibbles. I actually kind of enjoyed this. And the live action drop scene out of the Gauntlet, I'm definitely going to come back to and watch a bunch of times. I always loved watching the Mandalorians when they showed up in the animated series. So I'm going to come back to this moment a lot, watching them do the drop out of Bo's ship. 3 more episodes to go in this season, apparently. And it's in the books. Now it's just a matter of what are they actually going to give us? What are they going to show us in these remaining 3 episodes? We really have to get to the whole point of this season. Only 3 episodes left. That's not a lot of time to get to why this season exists. Because this has been 5 episodes of half of that time at least is filler. Half of the time's interesting stuff. And there have been a few moments that are, okay, these are really important, like world building, plot building moments, leading us to whatever this season's point is. Only 3 episodes to go. Well, let's hope we start getting to the actual meat and purpose of this season right out of the gate in the next episode.